Hello, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first session of our webinar series on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. My name is Michael Mitchell. I am the Director of Operations at Coalition for Rainforest Nations, and I'm really excited to have you all here as we dive into one of the most pivotal components of the Paris Agreement that promises to enhance cooperation in addressing climate change. We here at CFRN understand the importance of raising climate awareness, and specifically around topics like this, which can be very difficult to understand. So our goal for this series is to use the expertise of our team to walk you through the complex architecture of Article 6 in a way that we hope will not overwhelm you and is delivered in an easily digestible format. At the end of the session, I will lay out the series schedule, so you will be able to hold spaces on your calendars and join us as we dive deeper into each specific area of Article 6 as we move towards COP29 in Baku. I encourage you all to actively engage, ask questions in the chat. We will also ask questions throughout the presentation to make it an inclusive experience. And we hope you share your thoughts as we embark on this journey of learning together. Lastly, many have asked, yes, this session will be recorded and made available to you afterwards. Those details on how to access will also be given at the end of this session. So let's get started. I will now pass this to Kevin Conrad, our Executive Director, for his remarks. Enjoy, everyone. Kevin.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. There's been a lot of interest in Article 6, and there have been a lot of webinars. Unfortunately, those webinars have been held by people who aren't in the room. So if we're going to understand Article 6, we have to understand the entire architecture of the Paris Agreement. Article 6 is just one article, but it works in cooperation with 4 or 5 other articles in order to be effective. So we're planning I think it's 10 chapter training session on Article 6. And this is the introduction. So Michael, do you mind switching to the next slide for me, please? And you can run through this, all the options. Today, we're going to talk about NDCs. Article 6 operates in the context of NDCs, not in isolation. Not only that, Article 6 is part of the enhanced transparency framework. So is an emission reduction that is so claimed actually achieved, or a removal actually achieved? And how is it that Article 6 and cooperative approaches are structured? And what are the outstanding issues? Michael, if you'll switch again, please, for me, please. Thank you. So I don't know how many of you seen the news, but it was announced, I think, yesterday, that the previous 3 days were the hottest in history. And it's no wonder. If you look at emissions, total fossil fuels and land use change emissions, they've been on a steady increase. We had a minor pause during COVID, but they're trending upward again. The only exception to that is if you look at the bottom line there, emissions from land use change have been trending down over the past 20 years, probably thanks to the REDD+ mechanism, Article 5.2 under the Paris Agreement. Let me just make a point. As we look forward, how is it that we're going to succeed? Is it through voluntary action, or is it through compliance or regulation? We would argue strongly that while voluntary action has been very informative, we're past the date. We're past the use by date for voluntary action. Governments need to step forward. Governments need to do their job. They need to regulate carbon. And thankfully, it's happening. We now have about it's closer to 25% of all emissions, which are now under compliance markets. Voluntary markets are still less than 1%. But what lever do we pull? Are we trying to scale up the 1% to become 100? Or are we trying to scale up the compliance by 4 and get all emissions under a regulated environment? This is where the Paris Agreement comes in. Michael, next, please. In order to be effective, any kind of regime needs a goal. You can't just go, I'm going to reduce my emissions and applaud me, please. We need to have everybody in. We need to know the pace at which we're going to reduce emissions. With the speed and the scale is the only way that we're going to get this done. So the Paris Agreement has taken that challenge head on. It said that we want to try to keep climate change below 1.5, and we're bouncing along that threshold as we speak today, but maximum 2 degrees. It's saying that every government in the world has to be involved, not like the Kyoto Protocol, which failed largely, where it selected the wealthier countries and left developing countries to their own devices. Now everybody's in. But not only that, we need to have transparency. We need to find ways to sort of cooperate, finance. We need compliance, and we need to deal with adaptation and loss and damage, because we are experiencing that as we speak today. Michael, next slide. So as we look at Article 6, we must also take this in the context of Article 2. Article 6 must support Article 2, which is that we must keep well below 2 degrees, focus on our ability to adapt, and develop consistent flows of finance. This must be done in an equitable way, common but differentiated responsibilities, and in light of national circumstances. So you can't expect of the United States what you expect of Sudan. Let's just be honest about this. But both have their own responsibilities, and we need to do this in a fair way. Next slide, please, Michael. So as we think about Article 6, it is a mechanism that encourages those countries that move faster and beyond their NDC. It's an incentive structure. So if you set up your NDC and you can succeed, you are allowed to transfer those credits, which are below your NDC target, to another country which is struggling. The whole idea here is to seek the lowest cost of carbon abatement, but at the same time, make sure that we have an accounting system where we're staying on track. So how is it that we have NDCs that are consistent with the latest climate science? How is it that we incentivize countries to go faster than their NDC currently is set? And how is it that we allow those countries that can go fast to support, in exchange for finance, those countries that are having a harder time with abatement? The key here, though, is to avoid overselling. If we are not doing this under the construct of a global accounting system and increased ambition every 5 years, and credits that can just come out of a system without any limitation, two things are going to happen. We're going to have a very low price, and with a low price, we're not going to have the necessary abatement that we need to see in order to keep our Article 2 objective in line. Next, please. So you'll hear a lot of people out there saying, well, you need an authorization, and if you need a corresponding adjustment, you're good to go. Right? There are a lot of presentations out there saying that these are the only 2 requirements that are necessary for an ITMO to be an ITMO. We're going to explain to you in our next session that's not true. This slide here shows 42 requirements of every country in order to get themselves on the way to an ITMO being verified. 42 criteria. So there's an initial report required. There is annual information on how are you progressing against your NDC, and how is it that you have room in your emissions balance to be trading. And then you have regular information that has to be sent every 2 years to show that you have actually earned an ITMO. Thus, an authorization and corresponding adjustments are sort of the beginning and the end of the process, but in no way are they the only things that you need to be assured that you have an ITMO. Next slide, please. Oh, back one, please. So how is it that Article 6.2 operates in the context of Article 2, the ultimate objective, Article 4, which is your NDC? How is it that a specific sector like forests under Article 5.2, how do they work with 6.2? How does 6.4 fit in? And how does all this operate under the enhanced transparency of Article 13? So we have put together a flow chart that takes you through each one of those steps, step by step, with the notion that once you have your credits verified as part of your BTR and your carbon balance shows that you have headroom, then you can trade an ITMO. So verified and showing that you have space under your NDC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to some of our experts. These are experts that are in the room actually negotiating Article 6 rule sets. I would just close with the following. Article 6.2 is actually implementable today. There are some open questions about what I would call generally sequencing, and some open questions around how many registries do you have, how many authorizations do you have. But if you take the highest standard, you need the sovereign to authorize. You need to go through, you need to see that initial report. You need to go through the entire process, get it verified. You need to see the carbon balance, and you need to see the corresponding adjustment. If you take the highest level, you can implement Article 6.2 and Article 5.2 today. They're done. The questions that remain are really sort of eroding the atmospheric integrity. And you'll hear more from that from our expert team. So with that, welcome to our first session. We've got about 9 or 10 of these yet to come. Michael will brief you at the end. And I turn you now over to Leonardo Masai, who will take you through the beginning of this preliminary session.
Yes, thank you very much, Kevin. And Michael, I'm going to share my screen to take over the presentation. So good afternoon and good morning also from my side. I'm very happy to be here, part of this this initial session today. We, as a coalition, we have designed this Article 6 training program very carefully. So we will be together with those of you who have the interest and the passion and the patience to be with us for 10 more weeks, and we will drive you through together towards COP29 and Baku, where I'm sure, and we are sure, we will finalize the little pieces that are remaining in the architecture of this mechanism, Article 6. As Kevin mentioned, the Article 6 is integrated, is one of the core elements of the Paris Agreement, is part of the transparency framework, and therefore in these few slides together today, I will drive you through the main elements of this regime, bearing in mind that every single element, every single slide or sentence or concept that we're going to develop today, and there will be also time for questions at the end, will be taken up again in the next weeks during the whole training program, where we hope to give you a full picture of how this mechanism, Article 6, is functioning, and how especially developing countries can benefit from the opportunities that are given by this mechanism. So we will start with the Paris Agreement. which is, as all of you know, the new climate change treaty that will be with us for the next decades, dictating the fight to climate change as was decided in 2015 back in Paris. It took us many years of negotiation to get to the Paris Agreement, and that's also thanks to the coalition and to the members of the coalition that we have now a solid regime. And as I mentioned before, we hope that the Article 6 final pieces will be finalized in a few months in Baku, COP29. So we have also a set of questions for you to make this session the most interactive possible, given that we are all online here. So we will start with the first question, with the first poll. The NDC is the guiding national policy document on climate change under the Paris Agreement. The NDC, the nationally determined contribution, is the guiding national policy document on climate change under the Paris Agreement. That's our first ice-breaking question. And you have two options there, true or false. And I'm sure that Michael has sent the poll. So I will be waiting a few seconds for the result of this first initial question that will help us to break the ice and kick off the description of the regime. The NDC as the guiding national policy document on climate change under the Paris Agreement. Is that true or false?
We currently have a majority at true. So if you want to show the answer.
Yes, exactly correct. The answer is true. The NDC, the Nationally Determined Contribution, is the key national policy document on climate change under the Paris Agreement. And all countries under the Paris Agreement that have signed up to the Paris Agreement have an obligation to present an NDC every 5 years. And NDC is a policy document, and it's the overarching policy document, the guiding document that countries put together. It is the basis for every single decision the countries are taking on climate change. And Article 6 is part of the NDC, has to be considered within the description and the commitments the countries take under the NDC. The NDCs are mentioned in Article 3 and 4 of the Paris Agreement, and the regime that we have put together in Paris is designed in a way that the efforts and the NDCs will be submitted every 5 years. Efforts will have to be ambitious, more and more ambitious over time, and the progression should be also signaled and mentioned in the NDCs. So the NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution, is the result of a compromise after many years of negotiation for the commitment that countries are showing to the rest of the world under the Paris Agreement. NDCs are for all parties. The Paris Agreement is for all parties. So Article 6 and all the rules that we're going to explain and work together during this training program are valid and applicable to all parties, developing and developed parties, with only one important distinction to be made, that under the Paris Agreement, we have also a so-called flexibility provision, the fact that developing countries, in particular small island developing states and least developed countries, have the possibility to apply these rules with a certain degree of flexibility. So with the Paris Agreement, we have overcome, at least formally, the distinction between developed and developing countries in terms of annexes, as you remember in the convention, but we still have this distinction in terms of application of the rules, and that is called flexibility. So whenever you hear the word flexibility, developing countries have an option to apply and comply with the rules of the Paris Agreement with a certain degree of flexibility. So the NDC is the core document that must be prepared correctly and properly. And with the coalition and with our training program, we are also supporting countries to do that. And now we can get to the second question, the second poll where we have under this topic on NDCs. The Paris Agreement prescribes exactly the format and content to be included in the NDCs. Is that true or false? Do we have in the Paris Agreement a clear and rigid prescription for countries to what to include in the NDCs? Is that true or false? The Paris Agreement prescribes exactly the format and content to be included in the NDCs. I will let Michael collect the results very quickly.
Yes, so right now we are having the majority at false.
Exactly. So the correct answer, as you can see, is false. So the Paris Agreement doesn't give countries an exact and rigid prescription of what should be included in the NDC, of the contents of the NDCs. What we have agreed back in Lima just a few months before Paris was to give an indication to parties what they could include as an option, but not be prescriptive. There was the compromise that was reached. Again, keep in mind that all these rules are applicable to all parties at the same level, US, China, Madagascar, Congo, EU, all parties have to apply the same type of rules. So the compromise that was reached in Lima is that the NDCs can be including a different type of information from countries. And that is also one challenge when we're going to talk in a few moments about the global stock take, how we're going to take stock of what is in the NDCs and how this can be monitored. That is one challenge in the sense that, and in the fact that we have in the NDCs information which are different. So countries have the freedom, the sovereign freedom to decide the number of gases to be included, the timeline, the sectors, the coverage, the type of commitment, and that is all left to the countries, and that was agreed back in Lima. So Article 4, which is the key article of the Paris Agreement on mitigation, is talking about NDCs. Before that is mentioning that global peaking of greenhouse gas emissions should be get as soon as possible. Each party should prepare, communicate, and maintain successive NDCs that it intends to achieve. That is the section on NDCs. NDCs should be showing progression in ambition. So there must be a progression over time in all the NDCs that countries have to submit. The first NDC was due in 2020. The second will be due in 2025, so next year. It's very important that we prepare these NDCs correctly. Developed countries should continue taking the lead. There was a compromise reached in Paris, and support, very important support, should be provided to developing country parties for the preparation of this important document. So the Paris Agreement has been designed in a way that ambition can increase towards getting 2050 and a reality of a world which is net zero emissions. And therefore, we have created this cycle of NDCs that should come up every 5 years, 2020, 2025, 2030, and so forth and so on. And in between, we have the global stock take. So globally, collectively, all parties under the Paris Agreement, all together, we have to take stock of where we are in terms of mitigation and adaptation and decide what to do, whether to change gear or to continue at the pace that we are. And the first global stock take, as many of you know, just finished, ended a few months ago in COP28. And the first global stock take will be also discussed very briefly in a few slides. Global stock take will come every 5 years again, and in intervals that will be able to give us the possibility to check where we are and whether we should increase the ambition of our action. Global stock take is our third poll, our third question, again for you to contribute. And the question is, as outcome of the first global stock take, CMA5, that happened a few months ago during COP28, set parties individual targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the future. So CMA5, as part of the first global stock take, decided parties individual targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the future. Is that true or false? What is your opinion on the outcome of the first global stocktake that concluded in 2023? And I will let Michael.
There we have it. We have the majority at false.
Exactly. The global stocktake, uh, the answer to this question is false. The global stocktake, and it's already in the title is already an indication, is global. So what we did in COP28 was, and CMA5 was to take stock of where we are globally, collectively. That's the goal of the stocktake. And therefore CMA5 could not set any target for parties to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There was no mandate for the CMA5 to do that, no power to do that. This is set by countries by the countries at the national level through the next NDC. What we did in COP28 in CMA5 was just to take stock of where we are and take a decision that will guide us and also all the countries to develop the NDCs and to run also the implementation of Article 6 in the next few years. So very briefly here you have just a summary of what is the mandate and the goal and the purpose of the global stocktake, periodically taking stock of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, assess collectively the progress towards the Paris Agreement goals, doing that in a comprehensive and facilitative manner, so no punitive action, of course, when we're talking about global stocktake, and a cycle that will run every 5 years. And the outcome of that CMA5 is to inform parties in updating and enhancing in a nationally determined manner the actions and support. So basically informing parties on what they have to do in the preparation of the next round of NDCs, which again is due by 2025. So here you have a couple of slides on the result of COP28 in Dubai. And the result of that is shown in these two slides. First of all, the global stocktake told us where we are in terms of emissions. Without the Paris Agreement, we would be at a temperature increase of 4 degrees. With the Paris Agreement, we are now on a range of 2.1 to 8 degrees with a full implementation of the latest NDC. So still a lot of efforts to do to reach the 1.5 target set by the Paris Agreement. So we need emission reductions and removals in line with the science, in line with the IPCC information that we got recently. NDC ambition should be increased and should deliver deep, rapid, and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions of 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035. And what we need also is a strong input and boost in terms of finance, adaptation finance, but also the long-term finance, specifically the new goal, the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. But the result of CMA is also very important because historically it's telling all parties, the world, how to reach the 1.5 and how to increase our ambition. It's very great pleasure for all countries, especially for rainforest nations, that we have now a call for halting deforestation by 2030 in the CMA5 decision, and that explicitly referring to Article 5.2 and RED Plus, which is anchored to the Paris Agreement, which is a mechanism under the Paris Agreement that is already functioning, operational, and that sees a lot of our countries that are present today in this webinar very active and all of efforts in reaching results under this mechanism RED Plus 5.2. We will also spend a few slides on that in a few moments. But CMA5 decision, global stocktake, says that very clearly, halting deforestation by 2030, including mobilizing support to enable achievement of this important goal in accordance with Article 5.2 of the Paris Agreement. We also have a call for renewables, tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency by 2030. And a very important and unprecedented reference to transitioning away from all fossil fuels with the aim to reach a net zero emissions by 2050. That was set in stone in the CMA5 decision as the result of the first global stocktake. The Paris Agreement, NDCs, and Article 6 are all embedded and based on a very solid regime and monitoring system, which is called the Enhanced Transparency Framework, ETF. And that's the subject of our poll and question number 4.
And also, while people work on this question, I wanted to clarify that there has been some questions about the language of this. There will there will be the recording given out afterwards, and which will be available with subtitles that can be translated to any language you prefer. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And again, at the end of the session, I will give everyone instructions on how you can access that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. That's a very important reminder. And also there will be time for questions at the end of this session, of course. So the question number 4 is about transparency and the importance of this regime when it comes to Article 6 and what we have to accomplish to provide solid and results which have a high level of environmental integrity. So the question is, parties to the Paris Agreement are required to submit national communication and BURs to measure, report, and verify their actions under the Paris Agreement. Is that true or false? That is one element of the transparency framework. Parties to the Paris Agreement need to submit national communications and BURs to measure, report, and verify their action. True or false? And I will give the floor to Michael.
Yes, so we have the majority at true.
This question, the result is false. This question is a bit tricky, and I apologize for that. Actually, we have, especially for those of you who are very attentive and dedicated to the regime, a very delicate sentence in the sense that under the Paris Agreement, countries are required to submit national communication and BTRs, biannual transparency reports, to measure, report, and verify their actions. So the correct answer to this question is false, in the sense that countries have to submit national communication and biannual transparency reports. So with the Paris Agreement regime and with the new transparency framework, we are now referring to BTRs, biannually transparency reports, and the acronym is BTR. So countries, parties, all countries, developing and developed, have a lot of requirements to fulfill the transparency framework, and they have to submit national communications as it was up to now, and BTRs, biannual transparency reports, that are substituting and replacing the BURs. In this slide, you can see the architecture of the transparency regime under the Paris Agreement, and you have on the left side the sources of information that will feed into the core of the transparency regime, which is the reporting and the review, and on the right side you have the outcome. So on the left side you have the sources of information, and as you can see, there are a lot of information that parties have to prepare and submit to the transparency framework. Those include a few reports under Article 6 that we will be working through together in this training program, 6.2 and 6.4. There is some accounting provisions to be fulfilled so that we can verify, at least see where parties are in terms of tracking NDCs. There are information about finance. Countries, and that is a big novelty under the Paris Agreement, have to report on the finance provided, developed, and on the finance received, developing countries. That's a new innovation by the Paris Agreement. There is information about technology transfer, information about capacity building support. All this information will have to be included in the BTRs, biannually transparency reports, and national communication. The BTRs will be composed by, as you can see from the picture in the middle, greenhouse gas inventories, information to track progress on NDCs, information about adaptation, information about support provided, and information about support needed and received. All this kind of information will be reviewed by the technical expert review teams of the UNFCCC, and there will be some review reports that will be open for multilateral considerations by the parties together when together in Bonn and during the COP. This regime is very similar to the one that we had before the Paris Agreement that has been applied just until now, until 2024. It's very similar. And again, here we are going to have reports produced by individual experts nominated by the UNFCCC, independent expert. They will review the information provided. And the result of this review will be a multilateral discussion and consideration. And the result of this consideration, result of this discussion will be sent to the global strateg, just to take stock of where we are. It will be sent to countries individually so that they will have to update and enhance their NDC, and also will be linked to the mechanism to facilitate implementation and promote compliance under the Paris Agreement. So the result of this analysis, review of information will be very important because it will inform countries, governments, will inform the parties globally, but also will inform the compliance and implementation mechanism that we have under the Paris Agreement. And Article 6 is part of this transparency framework, and it's very important that we all together put a lot of attention and a lot of work on the preparation of these reports that will also be including a lot of the information for Article 6. I think we can get to the question number 5, which is about NDCs and tracking. So how we're gonna check what countries are doing in terms of implementation of their NDCs. And the question number 5 is, NDC tracking will happen under the ETF, under the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Is that true or false? So the tracking of NDC implementation and achievement will happen under the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Is that true or false? Is that the place where we are going to track NDC implementation or not? That is our question number 5.
Looks like we have the majority at true right now, Leo.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let me see. Yeah, the answer to this question is true. Exactly. So the regime that has been designed by all of us together in the negotiating rooms for many, many years and is summarized in a lot of CMA decisions is very clear. The tracking of NDC must be undertaken under the ETF, under the Enhanced Transparency Framework. How we're going to do that? There is a set of ETF tools, so transparency framework tools that parties have to fulfill and comply when preparing the BTRs, when submitting the information. There are certain tools that are online already, and in 2024 now the Secretary is launching the phase for checking these tools, and these are open to parties. Through these tools, parties are sending information about NDC, and there are tables, and there are common reporting tables, formats, and there are a lot of tables to be fulfilled where countries are going to put information about the tracking of NDC. So this will be done electronically, but also through the narrative, which will come from the biannual transparency reports. And it's throughout these tables that we will be able to see the NDC tracking. So how countries are doing in terms of NDCs. BTRs have to be submitted through these tools every 2 years. So 2024 is the first year, this year, then 2026, 2028, and 2030. And it's very important that we are going to prepare these reports properly. Article 6 and how we're going to apply Article 6, how many ITMOs we're going to sell, will be reflected in these biannual transparency reports. and this information will be also part of the NDC tracking. And so all this information will be sent to the Secretariat and will be checked at the end of the NDC period, which is for many countries 2030. So the BTR that will be submitted in 2030 will be very important, because there we will have the idea of the so-called emissions balance. Again, emissions balance is another very important concept that will be explained by our experts in this training program in the next sessions. And it's very important that we are well aware on how we are going to construct this emissions balance, because that will be the main result that we're going to check, the world is going to check in terms of countries, in terms of selling ITMOs, and how countries are implementing their NDCs, for example. So these ETF tools are going to be set properly this year for countries to be fulfilled. And it's throughout these tools that information will be provided, but also reviewed. So Article 6, we have poll number 6 for Article 6, and the question for you is: the cooperative approaches and mechanism created under Article 6 are already operational? Very important question. The options that you have in front of you in this poll number 6 is true, false, or Article 5.2 only. So cooperative approaches and mechanism under Article 6 are already operational. True, false, or only throughout Article 5.2. What is your view on this very important question?
We have a majority at 5.2 only.
Yeah, let's see what is the answer to this question. Yes, correct. The answer is Article 5.2 only. So the Article 6 rules, we're going to see that in a second, have been developed throughout the different meetings that we have had since Paris, very important, Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh. There are a few elements, a few pieces that are still to be finalized, and we hope to finalize those in COP29. But the Article 6 is already operational when it comes to Article 5.2 only. Why? Because Article 5.2, RED Plus, is the only sectoral mechanism that we have under the Paris Agreement that is already operational. Is it national, and countries can already produce and are already delivering results under 5.2, so-called RED Plus results, which are results that can be exchanged through Article 6 ITMOS by parties already. There are a few elements that we are going to finalize, hopefully, by COP29 on Article 6.2 and 6.4, but the main structure, the main infrastructure is already there, and that's what we are going to discuss together in these weeks together. At the end of my presentation, there will be also time for our lead Article 6 negotiators, just to give us a little bit of flavor of what we're going to discuss in the next weeks. So they will be mentioning what are the key elements of Article 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8 that are still in front of us. But the answer to this question is C. Article 6, very important element of the Paris Agreement, coming from the experience of the Kyoto Protocol, where we decided together to establish the so-called flexible mechanisms. Under the Paris Agreement, also, parties decide to give an opportunity to countries, developed and developing, to be able to exchange finance, exchange technology, exchange support, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fight against climate change. So the Article 6 mechanism are just a way through which we are going to try to achieve the Paris Agreement goals, but with an eye open for the market-based instruments and for the economic benefits for countries and individuals. So in Article 6, we have created 3 different mechanisms. The first 2 are market-based, and the last one, 6.8, is non-market-based. 6.2 is the exchange of mitigation outcomes, so-called ITMOs, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, ITMOS, is the acronym which was selected and chosen after many, many days and weeks of negotiations. And the compromise that was reached in Paris was to use this terminology, ITMOS, internationally transfer mitigation outcomes. Don't be afraid that we're going to spend a lot of time on what is the definition of ITMOS and how we are going to implement and generate ITMOS. What we can say that throughout 5.2 Red Plus, we can already generate mitigation outcomes in the forest sector. And again, this is the only sector that is ready because it's based on a long history of negotiation and decisions that are already there under the convention. So 6.2, voluntary cooperation. Countries can decide voluntarily to be together and exchange ITMOS towards achievement of NDCs and more. And we'll see in a moment what. The 6.2 is under the guidance of the CMA, the Conference of the Parties of the Paris Agreement. 6.4 is also part of the Paris Agreement, and it's basically a project-based mechanism very similar to the old CDM. It is a sustainable development mechanism designed to contribute to the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and support sustainable development. It is guided by the supervisory body, which is a designated body under the authority and the guidance of the CMA. And the CMA is also called by the Paris Agreement to adopt rules, modalities, and procedure. So very, very big difference between 6.2 and 6.4, and we're going to spend a lot of time together on these two mechanisms. But the biggest difference is that 6.2 is based on cooperation between governments and entities and countries and entities. And 6.4 is governed by specific rules that are designed by the CMA with the support of the supervisory body, and 6.4 is project-based, while 6.2 is looking at national scale outcomes, mitigation outcomes, which can come from reductions or removals of greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, we have 6.8, which is the third mechanism introduced by the Article 6, which is a framework for non-market approaches to sustainable development. So whatever all the non-market approaches, non-market initiatives will be feeding into 6.8, but we're going to hear a little bit about that in a few moments. So in this program that we have designed together in the next 10 weeks together before we meet probably all together at the COP in Baku, we are going to address the details of how the machinery of Article 6 is functioning. We are also going to go together the requirements, reporting requirements for countries. We're going to look at what is an ITBO, the authorization, the definition, the registry. We're going to look, very important, what countries have to put in place in terms of legislation. And we are going to look also at the decisions that have been adopted after Paris, after 2015. In particular, you see on the screen the list of key milestones that we have put together so far together. Katowice, very little about Article 6, just a few paragraphs, 2018. But very important milestone is Glasgow 2021, CMA 3, where we have 3 key decisions on Article 6, very, very important decisions, as well as Sharm el-Sheikh, where we have the CMA 4 decisions on Article 6. The last piece will come from COP29. There's a typo here in the slide. In Dubai, we didn't have a CMA 5 decision on Article 6. This will come by COP29. Michael, I see you on COP29.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. I just once again, I know there is a function on here that says that it would translate. That function will not work because the spoken language is English, so the text will be incorrect. So please do not change that the language in there, or it'll impact our transcript, and then afterwards the recording it'll be difficult to translate that. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but it needs to remain on English. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Very useful. So before I turn to our two lead negotiators, just to conclude on the main elements of Article 6, just a few words on 5.2. And then we have the question number 7. 5.2, Article 5.2 Paris Agreement. Point number 7, RED Plus under 5.2 is completely operational and delivering. And if you have been listening to me in this half an hour, probably the answer to this question would be very easy for you to complete. RED Plus is completely operational and delivering. Is that true or false?
Seems they're listening, Leo. Majority at true there.
Yeah. So the answer to this question is true. Yes. 5.2 is completely operational and delivering is already based on a set of decision that is already there. So countries are implementing RED Plus for many years already, and we have already a lot of results produced under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. 5.2 is including 95% of the world's tropical forest, including the RED Plus mechanism. Today, we have around 60 countries already actively engaged in the RED Plus mechanism, and we have already results that are shown around the 13 billion tons of carbon emissions reduced already. And those are verified and certified RED Plus results already up in the RED Plus information app under the UNFCCC. RED Plus, as again, is the only sectoral mechanism which is operational, is a national scale, is based on key UNFCCC decisions. One of the most important is the decision from Cancun, 1CP16, which is indicating the 5 activities under RED Plus, para 70, deforestation, so reducing emissions from deforestation, reducing emissions from forest degradation, conservation of forest carbon stocks, sustainable management of forest, enhancement of forest carbon stocks. Those are the 5 activities covered by the RED Plus mechanism as per Cancun in 2010, the 1 year after Copenhagen. What we have to do is already set, and we, together with the reinforced nations, are hardly and seriously working on this, is basically fulfilling the requirements that you have on the screen. Basically having a national strategy or action plan on RED Plus, establishing a forest reference emission level at the national scale, a national forest monitoring system, and a safeguards information system. When all these requirements are fulfilled, countries are basically ready to submit a technical annex on RED Plus on the BTR since 2024, and that technical annex is going to be reviewed by the reviewers under the convention, and RED Plus results formalized. So far, we have produced a lot of results under RED Plus, which is a national scale, and is based again on the Paris Agreement and the national approach. And then we have also the voluntary projects, which are also using subnational project-based activities in the forest sector, which is not to be confused with the RED Plus at the national level, which is much lower in terms of scale, in terms of results, in terms of outcomes. And that is also the challenge that we have in many rainforest nations, with a lot of projects coming from standards which have been agreed at the voluntary in the voluntary market, which are yet still very, very low in terms of producing results compared to RED Plus at the national level, which is based on national scale decisions, national strategies, national action plans, which have to be fully embedded in the NDCs, in the Article 6 strategies, in the national activities and efforts to reduce climate change, to fight climate change. That's very important. If we want to be effective, if we want to reach the 1.5 goal of the Paris Agreement, everything around RED Plus and actions in the forest sector, which is so important to reach the 1.5, has to be tackled at the national level and in full consistency with the inventory, with the NDC, with the Article 6 strategy, and the National RED Plus strategy. This picture is showing, again, the RED Plus info app, where we have already a lot of countries producing results from 2010 to 2021. RED Plus results are already verified, assessed, and published on the info app and are ready for use there. Now, before we close and we open for questions, I'm gonna hand over to our experts on Article 6 at the negotiations. Michael, through you. Thank you.
Correct. So the next is on 6.2. Aleo, if you want to move the slide ahead, just want to give a heads up. Just stay on. We have about 3 minutes left. So Eduardo, would you like to come on? These is what will be covered as we move closer to COP29. We just want to give you a preview of that. Leo, but maybe just in an effort to save time, you should just go through these bullets because there's only a few minutes left.
So yeah, do you want me to go through that?
Yes, just really just want to keep everyone on time there. So sure.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So basically, you see a lot of terminology here in the screen. And again, we are going to walk you through this together in the next weeks together, that we're going to review all this terminology together and how the Article 6 rules are functioning. These are just some examples of key items which will be addressed properly by our experts. Definition of cooperative approach, agreed electronic format, which is basically the format through which information has to be provided. Registries, is very important that countries have electronic registries in place to keep track and monitor exchange of ITMOs and units. Authorization, every single unit of an ITMO mitigation outcome getting out of countries has to be authorized by national authorities. It's very important we understand the sequencing of all the steps that Kevin at the beginning indicated, over 40 steps. It's very important we understand when this has to be done and what is the implication of that. So sequencing and review will be very important. And all that will be linked with a lot of concepts and things that we have to learn together, how to address inconsistencies, corresponding adjustments, very important emissions balance that I was mentioning before, and also the review of the BTR, since the result of Article 6 ITMOs will have to be reviewed under the BTR process, so that we have ITMOs and results and outcomes which have a high level of environmental integrity. 6.4, again, a very long menu of issues that will be considered. Authorization, also under Article 6.4. There is a lot of interaction between 6.4 and 6.2 when Article 6.4 reduction, which are called ERs, will become ITMOs. The registry, also 6.4 project, will be having a registry to be tracked. The work of the supervisory body, which is very important, very active, and taking a lot of decisions on a lot of technical issues. So we are also going to look at the supervisory body work for 6.4, which is, again, to remind, it's always under the guidance of the CMA. In particular, the recommendation for 6.4 methodologies and an important recommendation on activities involving removals. And then we're also going to look at many other issues around this important mechanism. And to conclude with a few words on 6.8, which will be also the subject of a dedicated training in this very important program. 6.8 as alternative policy approach and based on the GMA integral and sustainable management of forest, which is also part of 5.2 on the Paris Agreement, but to be differentiated from RED Plus. That's very clear in the Paris Agreement text. The focus will be on non-carbon benefits, no carbon trading, no market approaches for achieving NDCs, looking also at sustainable development and poverty eradication, and also how these non-market approaches will also have some support for not only mitigation, but adaptation, activities, finance, support technology transfer and capacity building. With that, I think that we can conclude, at least my part, before we open for question and give the floor to Michael to just to give you an idea on what will be the menu and the future of our sessions in the next weeks. Article 4, NDCs, done, agreed. NDCs machinery already running. Next round will be 2025. We are all working hard to fulfill the global stocktake outcome in the preparation of NDCs. 5.2 Red Plus done in terms of rules. Countries actively engaged, working hardly to produce Red Plus results. Article 13 rules done. 2024 this year, very, very important. We're going to kick off with the submission of BTR. So working again very hardly to prepare the first BTRs. Article 6 basically done. Hopefully the next few steps to be taken together in COP29, but the machinery is already there and what we have to do is already there. So we are also working very hard with all our countries to make sure that we prepare and we are ready to produce Article 6 outcomes and results that are in line with the ambition set under the Paris Agreement. So with that, I'm going to stop here and give you the floor. Michael, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Leo. That is a great job. It was a lot of information, but I think it was very useful for everyone there. So as we discussed, I am now putting the schedule of what will go up there. As you can see, today we had our introduction. And on September 5th, we'll have the Article 6.2, definitions and concepts, participation requirements, Red Plus, and IPOs and NDCs. On the 12th, Article 6.2, reporting requirements and sequencing. On the September 19th, Article 6.2, emissions balance and corresponding adjustments. September 26th, Article 6.8, October 3rd, Article 6.2, developing the initial report. On the 10th, we'll have the Article 6 legal framework on carbon transactions. October 17th, Article 6.2 registry and platform. The 24th, we'll have Article 6.4, and the 31st, we'll have Article 6 and COP29. At least that is the schedule that we would like to keep on. So for anybody that wants to, for the sessions that we said for this to be recording, there's 2 barcodes here if you'd like to go ahead and use that to scan. On the left is our YouTube page. I would recommend subscribing to that. That is where the recordings will go with the transcript, so you'll be able to have subtitles in French, Spanish, whichever you prefer. And on the right is a code for our website. If you keep an eye on the webinar tab, that is where our information will go up on the upcoming webinars. However, of course, we will still reach out via social media, emails to let everyone know and to register for those. So that is the end, but we do have questions in the chat. So for you that want to stay, we will start answering questions. For you those that have to go, thank you so much again for attending. So Leo, I don't know if you want to, quite a few, if you want to go through there.
Yes, I can start. Looking at the chat, there are a few questions coming up. So let me start and now please let me know if I'm going to miss any. The first one is about corresponding adjustment. Will have to show up in the BTR report. How can a country show proof of corresponding adjustment in the report? Is every 2 years. Is there an electronic submission from the BTR that guarantees that will be seen later in the BTR? So corresponding adjustment will be also tackled in one specific section and training session together. Corresponding adjustment, yes, will have to be included in the BTR reporting. And there will be, yes, electronic submission to the BTR. There will be throughout the reporting tools. And therefore, this will be there and will be tracked. And there will be, of course, guarantee that this will be seen later in the BTR. It's very important that corresponding adjustment will be applied as prescribed by the CMA decision every time that the country is going to exchange ITMOS with another country or with an CMA decision of Glasgow. And again, this will be tackled in a full sketch seminar together. But yes, corresponding adjustment is one important element set up by the Article 6 rules to make sure that there's no overselling, and make sure that environmental integrity is maintained, and 1.5 goal of the Paris Agreement is actually achieved. I see. I don't know, Kevin, if you want to intervene now or later.
Yeah, Leo, I wanted to jump in on the next two questions. There was something about jurisdictional red under VERA and the links to between Article 5 and Article 6 that I wanted to cover. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Thank you.
So let's talk quickly about jurisdictional red from VERA. What jurisdictional red is doing under VERA is, again, avoidance, which is not permitted under the Paris Agreement. And the incentives are set up incorrectly. So let me just explain it. What they're proposing is that you take the emissions of a country over a given period, and now those emissions are the maximum avoidance credits that can be granted to all avoidance projects in the country. Now, avoidance works like this. Avoidance is there is no deforestation, but we are going to create models and theories about future deforestation based on some hypothetical assumptions about what's going to occur in the future. The Paris Agreement does not allow this. The Paris Agreement only allows, give me your historical emissions, and you only get credit if your emissions are less on a national level in the future. Now, here's a perverse incentive. VERA will take this emissions total, attribute it to a bunch of people who claim they are stopping future deforestation. Obviously, they're not stopping historical deforestation trends. So let's assume deforestation goes up. VERA then gets more credits the next cycle because deforestation went up in the country to attribute to their avoidance projects in the country. So the incentive structure is upside down. Actually, you benefit by deforestation going up periodically in the sense that you get more avoidance credits. The Paris Agreement does not allow any of this. You have to only have historical emissions. You must reduce emissions based on those historical rates. The avoidance and avoidance theories is specifically and intentionally banned and will be never permitted into the Paris Agreement. Now, next question. How does Article 5 and Article 6 link together? If you go into the RED Plus decisions, on multiple occasions, the parties have agreed that RED Plus will fit into future market-based mechanisms subject to the processes of those future market-based mechanisms. So credits will be generated under Article 5.2, and then they go through the BUR-BTR verification process. And those credits will have to follow then, they'll have to be part of the emissions balance, they'll have to be authorized, they'll have to be part of initial reports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a direct link between Article 5 and Article 6 that has been pre-agreed by all parties. Every country in the world has agreed to this, and it's already in existing decisions. And so Article 5 must fulfill all of the requirements of Article 5.2 and all the requirements of 6.2 in order to be counted as an ITMO. So Leo, I don't know if you want to take the next questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I think the next question is, I can see only one question, which is about Article 6 to government, how many percent should be shared between two countries? Article 6.2 rules are very clear. ITMOs, as we will see together, have to be outcomes that are real, verified, and additional. So countries will have to fulfill their indices internally and use the exchange of ITMOs as an additional activity. So there is no percentage indicated in the rules. This will be left to the decision of governments, but it's very important that the ITMOs are going to be exchanged, are going to contribute to the 1.5 and to be real, verified, and additional.
So one last point, I have to call out Carlos Manuel Rodriguez for his historical significance. Colleagues, when we were starting the RED Plus mechanism that now has become Article 5.2, Carlos Manuel was the Minister of Environment for Costa Rica. And I was representing the Prime Minister's office of Papua New Guinea, and our deforestation was going up. And under Carlos's leadership, deforestation in Costa Rica had not only slowed, but they had sort of made the turn. They were increasing their forest cover. So the two of us met and we agreed that this was a really important South-South cooperation opportunity, and we launched the coalition together. So Carlos, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to working with the GEF, and I know you have some ideas. And as always, we started this together. Let's keep going together. Back to you, Leo.
Yeah, Michael, do you see more questions?
No, I think that about wraps it up. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. I really hope this was helpful to you, and I look forward to us taking this journey together and learning more about Article 6. Again, on the screen, if there's more questions about from this presentation, please feel free to email Leonardo at the email address above, or if you have other questions about the series or even suggestions for other webinars, my email is michael@cfrn.org. So thank you all very much. We're really grateful to have you join us, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you.